Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lauren Doyle, and my thesis is on Breaking Code Silent, the Troubled Teen Industry Under Spotlight. Each year, an estimated 200,000 American teenagers are sent to behavior modification programs, places that claim to rehabilitate, but instead are places reported to involve the use of humiliation, abuse, and in some cases, preventable death. Under the appearance of treatment, this industry offers parents a solution while simultaneously exposing their clients to harm. Even women like international icon Paris Hilton has come forward as being a survivor of this institution, exposing their cruelty hidden behind its deceptive marketing. This industry continues to operate despite the closure of individual camps, with new ones frequently opening and operating outside of legal oversight. It is time for society to examine these camps, address its systemic issues, and close the regulatory loopholes that have protected them. Urgent reform is necessary. The problem with the teenager who behaves in an alarming, illogical, or combative way is that they often cannot understand their own behavior. This is nothing new, as illustrated in Daniel Keyes' Flowers for Algernon, which was written in 1959. This tale follows Charlie Gordon, a neurodivergent man who is desperate to be seen as neurotypical. Like troubled teens, Charlie wants to be seen as, quote, normal. The tale opens with Charlie's first progress report. He was full of hope and excited to begin his journey to normalcy, whatever that may have looked like. Simultaneously, his rat companion Algernon undergoes the same experimental surgery. As time progresses, and as Charlie writes more progress reports, his intelligence seems to increase. He would go from misspelling common words, such as common or failed, to understanding complex psychological ideas and experimentation. The experiment would begin to prove too much for Charlie, however, as he was being overworked even in sleep. The doctors would force him to wear headphones with educational lessons on overnight. Charlie's brain had no way of coping with the rapid treatment and experimentation, much like teenagers have no way of coping with the drastic measures taken at troubled teen camps. Charlie's brain had no way of coping with the rapid treatment, overwhelming stimuli, or the unethical medical practices taken by the doctors, similar to the helpless use this industry has preyed on. Eventually, Charlie was forced to confront the painful return to his original cognitive state. To understand the troubled teen industry, one must first understand a behavior modification program, its practices, and its differences to mental health rehabilitation. A program for troubled youth can describe a teen boot camp, residential center, therapeutic boarding school, or wilderness camp that is designed to modify the behavior of an adolescent. While a troubled teenager can describe a teenager who is suffering from a behavioral, emotional, or learning problem that disrupts their daily life. These must present as persistent patterns for the teenager to be considered troubled, and it is also important to note that not every teenager who is considered troubled needs rehabilitation, let alone inpatient rehabilitation. Behavior modification programs are not mental health hospitals, and that mental health hospitals are licensed entities that rehabilitate. Behavior modification programs often have no such licensure policy. Behavior modification programs do, however, employ the use of behavioral therapy. Behavioral therapy is the approach to alleviate a medical or psychological illness under the belief that behavior is something that is learned and unlearned. While behavioral therapy is beneficial when used correctly and ethically, the troubled teen industry often abuses its clients under the guise of behavioral therapy. Abuse can mean many things, whether physical or psychological. Under the law, physical abuse is the intentional hurt, injury, or harm of another person, while psychological abuse is a little bit harder to define. Under the law, psychological abuse is the form of intentionally causing someone emotional stress, bereavement, and humiliation through patterns of isolation and humiliation. With these terms most correctly defined, we can strip away the facade of the troubled teen industry and reveal it for what it truly is. On October 18, 1977, Sally and Bob Bacon would welcome home their precious little boy, Aaron Bacon. Throughout his life, Aaron was described to be kind, intelligent, and full of potential. He completed their happy little family of Sally, Bob, Jared, and Aaron Bacon. By 1994, his father, Bob Bacon, had been sober for 8 years, which was a wonderful accomplishment. While Jared and Aaron were growing up, Bob had always been open about his addictions, understanding the reality of life as an addict. It was through this parenting that Aaron's heart and compassion could flourish. Growing up, he would make sandwiches for unhoused people, stand up for kids being bullied in school, and he had a deep love and appreciation of poetry and music. Though when he was in the 8th grade, his older brother Jared would begin to experiment with drugs. And when Aaron was 16, his behavior would soon follow suit as he would begin to cut class, smoke marijuana, and sneak out. Although this disturbed and worried the Bacons, they understood that their son was not an addict. He simply needed a little bit more hope and guidance in life. And that is when the Bacons found North Star Expeditions, a behavioral modification program located in Utah. It was owned by Bill Henry and Lance Yeager. The Bacons met with both co-owners and even Lance Yeager's wife, Barbara Yeager, who eventually had convinced them that North Star would be just the right thing for Aaron. Subsequently, after signing a $14,000 check, Aaron would be transported from warm, sunny Phoenix to a much colder Utah by the staff. When Aaron arrived at the camp, his situation was about as bleak as the weather, as the staff at North Star was untrained, unaware, and unkind. They had even given Aaron boots a size and a half too small, which would cause brutal and relentless blisters to form on his feet from the countless miles he was subjected to hike. As Aaron would begin to lose weight, and as the weeks passed, Aaron would develop an ulcer in his stomach, which would cause brutal and relentless pain, but was fairly simple and easy to treat. When Aaron would begin to complain about stomach pain, his complaints would be met on deaf ears. The staff at North Star would continue to ridicule and abuse him. And as Aaron got weaker, he would become incontinent. And to further ridicule poor Aaron, the staff at North Star would take away his pants. By March 29th, Aaron was so weak that he could no longer walk. And on March 31st, Aaron would collapse in the desert. He would die right there. He spent less than 1 month in the wilderness. The staff at North Star coldly explained the situation to Sally and Bob, saying, quote, "Aaron is fallen and he's not responsive," end quote. Bob and Sally demanded justice, and they decided to take action against North Star. Though Lady Justice would weep that day, as the staff at North Star were given petty fees, community service, and probation. The only prison sentence that was ever given out was to Craig Fisher, his on-site counselor. He served 1 year of his original 5-year sentence. Richard Nixon would base his presidential campaign on the promise to eradicate drug use in America by initiating the war on drugs. It was through this initiative that a tough love philosophy could prosper. Through Nixon's use of rhetoric and stereotyping, America's heart towards the addicts would begin to harden. He would use inflammatory phrases such as keeping families together, building communities, and protecting us Americans to make the public feel as if they were the united front combating drug use in America. While on the other hand, he would use double phrases such as destroy, attack, the magnitude of drugs, the enemy, and all-out war to make the public react violently against drug users. Suddenly, any teenager who was acting like a typical teenager was now a drug addict. In essence, if a girl had a bad attitude, she was clearly strung out on meth. If a guy wanted to wear all black, he was clearly smoking heroin. And if a girl wanted to cut her hair short, she was clearly on the worst form of drug imaginable. By the 1960s, the war between teenagers and adults was in full swing. Born in 1969, Richard Bradbury was just like any other boy. He enjoyed Star Wars cards, Cub Scouts, and playing baseball. Though his entire life would begin to change when he was around the age of 11 and his neighbor, a local fireman, would begin to molest him. The neighborhood boys who lived around him would begin to call him a plethora of homophobic slurs. And even to adulthood, Richard never knew if the boys who bullied him knew he was being molested or if they too were being molested. His mother never worried about him, and it was not until his younger sister, Andrea, was sent to Strait Incorporated that Richard would soon become a patient there. Richard would spend countless years, first as a patient and then as a member of the staff, where he never received formalized training on mental health problems. It would take decades of therapy to undo all of the brainwashing that he went through at Strait Incorporated, and he would spend the next the next few decades of his life being an outspoken critic of the troubled teen industry. Lulu Corder was just another victim of the industry when her mother decided to enroll her in Kids of New Jersey Incorporated. Unlike her older brother Sam, Lulu had never had a drug problem. She had never smoked marijuana, let alone anything stronger than that. She just simply wanted to keep up with the trends and fashions of the 1980s, which included dressing in all black like Madonna and wearing a ponytail in imitation of Boy George, a popular singer at the time. When Lulu arrived at Kids of North Jersey, a boy who had molested her in childhood was already a patient there. Lulu would spend the next 13 years, from the age of 13 to 26, being sexually molested, abused, and bullied by co-owners and husband and wife, Ruth Ann and Miller Newton. They were sadistic in their treatments of Lulu, and they would watch her in the most private of acts, 24/7, all day, every day. They were the new, quote, mom and dad of the patients. When Lulu decided to leave Kids of North Jersey when she was 26, she sued the Newtons. A former patient there would testify for Lulu, describing one psychological break she suffered, into which she suffered so heavily she decided to bite a hole in her own arm. David, another patient of Kids of New Jersey, also had 2 serious suicide attempts on his life. If true rehabilitation was happening at Kids, why would 2 patients have such severe psychological breaks? By the 2010s, the industry was still thriving, and still abusive, and they were bringing in countless amounts of money. Teenagers' daily life is engulfed in work there, whether it be outside, indoors, or in the wilderness. And with practices such as teen transport, trust between teenager and their mental health care provider was at an all-time low. Teen transport describes a practice taken by staff at behavior modification programs, into which they come into a teenager's home and legally kidnap them, often forcibly and in the middle of the night. Robert Friedman would sum up this practice as, open quote, historically in this country, we have witnessed a variety of efforts to address the issue of children and adolescents whose behavior is of concern to us. Primarily, the response has been to take them far from urban centers so that they might break away from negative influence of city life, to programs for delinquents and to programs for children with mental health problems. In the modern day, phone calls home are often scripted and watched heavily, and this lack of unscripted communication cannot allow for a true parent-child relationship. One of our First Amendment rights is the right to speak, and when God created the world and everything around it, He spoke it into life. By taking away this one fundamental right that we have as Americans, this industry reveals the lack of care they have for suffering teenagers. And by the 21st century, the industry would begin to revolutionize and would soon bring in more and more faces and more checks. In 2001, Anthony Haynes would die of near drowning and dehydration. Before collapsing in the desert, Anthony would begin to hallucinate, behave erratically, and he would even begin to eat dirt. In response to this, instead of the staff taking him to a local hospital, the staff at his behavioral modification program decided to take him to a local hotel room and, in essence, waterboard him, forcing him to intake copious amounts of water that would lead to his death. In 2002, Ian August, a 14-year-old who was sent to a behavioral modification program, would also die from extreme staff negligence. Ian was very overweight and in very poor shape, and the staff at his behavior modification program decided to ignore medical advice, and this negligence would lead to his death. In that same year, Katie Lank, a 16-year-old, would die from plummeting 70 feet from a tree she was forced to climb. In 2002, Charles Moody would die from traumatic asphyxia as the staff at his behavior modification program would sit on him and restrain him for nearly 30 minutes. In 2007, Caleb Jensen would be murdered by the industry in a similar way to Aaron Bacon, where he would develop a staph infection, and the staff at Alternative Youth Adventures would ignore his complaints of stomach pain, and that would lead to the loss of his life. In 2016, Lane Lesko, an autistic teenager, would suffer a mental breakdown, and he would escape from Summit Youth Adventures. The staff at his camp would report him missing and dangerous to the local authorities. Lane Lesko would begin to freak out and yell at the local police, and his refusal to comply with them would lead to the tragic loss of his life. In 2014, Alec Lansing would also die from falling from a tree, where the staff at his behavior modification program would ignore the symptoms of hypothermia, leading to the loss of his life. From 1958 to the present, the troubled teen industry has left a disgusting, bloody legacy of abuse, neglect, and dead children. They are victims of an enterprise that they are too young to understand, losers to a game that they never knew they were playing. This industry has proven that it will never learn, it has never listened, and it has never cared. Lulu Corder, Katie Lank, Richard Bradbury, and Aaron Bacon are not names on a list. They are not pieces of a thesis, and they are not footnotes. They are real, genuine human beings who were tortured and murdered by this industry. This industry can try to hide itself, try to explain these deaths as unforeseen complications or happy little accidents, but no euphemism can wash away the truth. These children were violated, humiliated, abused, and in many cases killed. No child who is seeking mental health rehabilitation should return home in a body bag. No parent should be tricked into paying for their child's abuse. No struggling teenager should be kidnapped, restrained, starved, humiliated, or killed under the guise of tough love. This industry has not merely harmed teenagers, but has completely disrespected the image of caring for a child, much less a suffering child. Each person, every addict, and every teenager is worthy of the same dignity, love, and respect we give ourselves. This industry will not and cannot be reformed with pretty promises, optional guidelines. This industry must be held accountable. The world and these children's families will never forget about them, and we should never let the industry forget them either. Thank you for your time. Yes, Ms. Cheney.
So lots of people, their topic surprises me and I'm confused. Your topic does not surprise me at all. Since you came to school here, one of the things that I have admired and loved about you is you consistently have compassion for the down and out, the underdog. That's just who you are, and I think everybody would agree with that. So I'm not surprised by your topic at all, and I can totally see you doing something in the future. So there's a lot that was in your paper that you didn't get a chance to talk about, but the question I have for you is, because there are troubled teens, there are parents who are desperate for help, what would be a recommendation for parents who are seeking something?
Yes. I think therapy is honestly a lovely start with some of these kids. And then also, behavior modification programs are not the issue. The issue is the way that they're doing it. So you should look for camps who do allow phone calls home and who don't lead so much towards behavior modification and more mental health rehabilitation. That's what you're looking for.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Ms. Vindelay.
First, I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
Your passion for it, reading the language you use in your thesis was pretty strong. And so it was great. But in a country that legislate everything, how much you can hunt, how much you can do this, how can this have gone unregulated for so long? That's
a really good question. And I think it plays into a lot of different things. When the first behavior modification program opened, which I call Synanon, the war on drugs was also happening. So simultaneously, we had the fear of the addict, we had this new fear of teenage rebellion, and then it was kind of just one of those industries that just got grandfathered in. And also, nobody really wants to think that kids are being abused and neglected like this in America. I think they just found the perfect group of people to take advantage of.
Thank you.
Great job, Lauren. So, in Shreveport, we have a mental health institute, and if people start having suicidal ideation, they go there, and quite frankly, I don't know anyone who goes there who thinks it's a good place to go. It's the only place to send people. And I imagine that parents of troubled teens feel the same way, like, I don't have any answers, what should I do?
They 100, sorry. But I think that's the industry's favorite thing. And I think that's when parents are at their most
Taking advantage
vulnerable.
of people,
Because a lot of these places have on their websites, if you don't send your kid to one of these camps, they're going to be incarcerated, dead, or in a mental hospital within a year, which is not always true. We don't always know what's going to happen.
That's right, yeah. And I have seen that, like, mental health people frequently can manipulate parents in different ways when their kids are having these struggles. But if you were going to develop a program that would help troubled teens, I'm curious, kind of, it was in-house, what are some differences you would have from these programs, that kind of thing?
One, I would have more phone calls home. I am a very firm proponent of kids and parents should always be able to contact. I've always been that way. If I want to call my mom, I'm going to call my mom. I don't care. But, and then next, I would not lean into behavioral modification programs so much. I would lean more towards rehabilitation and figuring out the core issue to these behaviors. Oftentimes, bad kids are not bad kids because they want to be. There's an underlying issue there.
I appreciate that. And I wonder even, like, usually parents need some coaching as well as the kids, so I like your approach, so thank you.
Can you say more about the behavior modification versus rehabilitation thing? Like, help me understand that a little more.
So behavior modification program, that first step is just changing the behavior. We're not, so like let's take a depressed kid who lays in bed all day. What they're going to focus more on is getting the kid out of bed, not solving the depression. They don't ever go to the root problems of it.
I'm curious to know, so you cited, there's lots of examples, very, very specific examples. They're hard to hear, right?
They're very hard.
I guess my question is, are these outliers in this industry? Are you saying, like, this is the wide, like, everyone is like this?
Not everybody who goes to the industry,
I mean,
thankfully, is murdered.
that's an extreme,
yes.
but give me a sense of how expansive we're talking about here.
If you go, honestly, you can Google troubled teen industry, nothing positive comes up.
I will not do that. Thank you.
The only thing that comes up as positive is their own camps and their marketing schemes. And so, like, before I really started researching formally, I was just on TikTok messing around. And a lot of people...
Sorry, let me just dial real quick. Okay, I'm back.
A lot of people experience extreme amounts of nightmares, PTSD, just stuff that teenagers should not be dealing with.
So, I mean...
Like, the easiest thing that most of these kids come out with is a little bit of trauma, and then obviously the worst thing is they get murdered.
You have such a way with words, Laura. Okay, so the other thing I was thinking of while you were talking is these obviously are for-profit
Yes.
organizations. Is this only in the for-profit world? Is there a non-profit, like, corollary to this? And if so, are those better at this than this?
Not the industry as a whole is for profit. That's what makes it an industry, and I think that's where the problem comes in. I haven't really ever seen a nonprofit organization for troubled teens.
Okay.
Those statistics, though, look
Are
like
very
things
haunting.
have gotten better.
Actually, these statistics, these are deaths that have been 100% reported and 100% investigated. So this is like, at the bare minimum, this is how many kids have died. The issue came in with since all of these kids are under 18, they legally can't put out so much information on these cases.
And what do you think would be the difference? I've heard lots of people say when they're troubled boys or young men especially, that the military is a good option for them. So what would be the difference between something like this and maybe military training? Because that's, you know, that's some behavior modification.
Military training, I honestly, there's another life at the end of that. These behavioral modification programs treat these kids like prisoners. A lot of like boys that go in have to have their heads completely shaven. When they walk, they have to hold the person in front of their belt loop. It's just stuff you don't think is happening in the modern times. And I think the major difference is like that's a job. They have work in that and there's value in that versus there's no value in this.
Well, wilderness therapy does not sound like
It does
something I would
not
want to
sound
sign up for.
Climb a tree.
Don't climb a tree, that's right.
I don't know if this is a question or comment. I worked at a alternative school in Chicago for a year and a half with kids who were in gangs and drug dealing and criminal history. They all had parole officers that came to their meetings, and I only did that for a year and a half, or I was going to snap. I would imagine that the adults working in this environment probably have very little oversight, little training, little support, and
can't
probably
even
stay in the
call
job
them
way
adults.
too long. Is that?
They're my age. A lot of these staff at these camps are my age.
Okay, well, so that makes my point. Yeah.
They're kids.
Yeah.
Is this industry regulated at all?
There's been new laws in 2024, but not really.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
The Stop Institutionalized Child Abuse Act.
Well, I remember when you were a junior and you brought this idea up. I had seen on the news that Paris Hilton had gone to Washington, D.C., and she was advocating about this topic that you chose. But what do you know the latest on that? Like, where did that go after she went to Washington, D.C.?
I
Did
think
something happen?
after the government shut down, it was just one of those things they just threw out.
That would be a great frisbee throw, by the way.
I think the issue comes in that they're teenagers and they're drug addicts, and no one wants to think of a 15-year-old having a drug problem. Like, no adult wants to think about that, and nobody wants their kid to have a drug problem.
Yeah, having celebrities, petition lawmakers sometimes can be effective. And I have wondered, in reading your paper, and I've just wondered did it make any difference? How much regulation will happen because of her bringing it. Sometimes it does. It takes a famous person to bring attention to a terrible cause.
So I guess you need to figure out how to be famous, Lauren.
I can get on TikTok.
Okay.
Maybe do it differently than Paris
Mr.
Hilton
Dottie
did.
died again.
Sarah, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just curious. So, oftentimes, when these things happen, or children are like taken or like taken away from their family, it's because there's a legal stipulation with like a lot of times they can just claim they're in danger to themselves or danger to the others, and when that happens legally, the parents no longer have any right to the child. So, do you think there's a better way of evaluating whether a child is actually a danger to themselves or others? Because those qualifications are very big. So,
They are. I don't know, that's a good question. But the problem with the industry is that this teen transport, the parents pay for it. So like the parents are picking this for their child. And I don't think they ever quite realize that they are being actually legally kidnapped. And I think with more understanding and more compassion, we could lead to having a better list of qualifications. Oh, Baxter?
You ever seen the movie Holes?
No.
It would get you riled up.
The troubled scenes.
Yeah.
Hey, well, now that your thesis has been presented, you have plenty of time to go watch it. So
Yay!
good job.